I'd like to bring our brother and sister up. They're not brother and sister, they're my brother and sister, okay? Sorry, they're married. Come on, guys. Thosh Collins and Chelsey Luger.
Oh my God.
We just...
Hi.
Would you like the timer to go your full time, or would you like... Okay, so do you remember Thosh? He was doing some movement exercises with us a couple conferences ago. Yeah, some of you remember? Thosh was up here doing the movements. Yeah, someone remember? That was excellent. And they also have a new book. Oh my gosh. I'm really proud of them. They are the co-founders of Well for Culture in Phoenix, Arizona, and they discuss Indigenous foodways, connection to land, community, and ceremony. So good to see you again. I think the last time I seen Chelsey in Flagstaff with PWNA.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so good to see you.
You as well.
Welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, good to be here.
Yeah, good to see you guys. It's all yours now.
All right, thank you. Thosh ni hajenya. Anya na chugi Thosh Collins. On kakamir autumn javadam jod archun. Sapentat kamye. Sapentat kakia amdam ga Dakota javidka. Saphaichika janti jivia. Really happy to see you all out there. Happy to be standing in this beautiful territory of the Dakota people. And I'm from the Onkakamir Autumn people in Arizona. You might know us as the Pima, right outside of Phoenix area, the Phoenix Valley area. We have some other, raise your hands, some other people from Salt River, some Onkakamir Autumn right there. There's our Hajjan over there. Also, Waijaji and Seneca on my maternal side as well.
All right, hello everyone. I'm Adalkiapi. Hello relatives. It's great to be here today. My name is Chelsey, and even though I've been in Arizona for the last 10 years or so with my husband and our kids, I was born and raised closer to here. I was born and raised over there in North Dakota. I'm from the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa on my mom's side, and I know there's some other Turtle Mountain folks here today. And on my dad's side of the family, I'm from Standing Rock, so I'm also Hunkpapa Lakota on that side. All right, there we go. So yeah, as Thosh said, it's good to be here in Dakota territory again for this conference. I think this is my third time here, I think, and always a good one. We always learn so much, and so many thanks for inviting us once again. It's an honor to be here, and even more of an honor to be able to share what we know on the stage today. Mm-hmm.
And what we want to share with you today is, before we get into it, actually, we want to share with you, this is just who we are as a family, as mother and father, and this is our two daughters. Weston is 4, Aloe is 7, and we have a little boy right here upstage with us. And so, thank you. And this is who we are as people. We are just a family. We're just community members. We're relatives, just like each and every one of you, who are very passionate about intergenerational healing and passionate about seeing a vision of our people thriving in the future. And our Foodways is a big part of that. So we wanted to just share a little bit about our daughters and who we are as a family and where we come from and the work that we do as community health educators, as people who are advocates of healing and wellness. We realize it's all for putting into our children and their generations and the generations to come. So this is just us. This is our daughters. We take them out on the land. Behind them is a Svugtuag. It's one of our sacred mountains there in Salt River. Beautiful place right there. And so...
And just to interject too, and just like piggybacking off of what our sister Rowan White said earlier, it's really feels good when we're able to raise our kids with some of the things that we didn't have. We were brought up, with our culture, with our ceremonies, and knowing our families and who we are. But, there's so much in the colonial process that has also sort of maybe gone to the wayside or been silenced and things like that. And our health and wellness teachings is a part of that process for us. And so we just feel very grateful to be able to raise our children with that, and that so many of you in this room are also doing the same.
Mm-hmm. So we want to share with you all today 7 circles is a framework we've created for living well that's rooted in our Indigenous lifeways. And Chelsey and I started Well for Culture. It's a social entrepreneurship We started that in 2014, and we began creating this model that we're going to share with you in 2018, and then we had written our book about it in 2022. And we always say that in here now in 2025 and beyond, our goal is to enliven and reform a movement for Indigenous communities to heal and thrive for future generations to come. That's the part of the framework that we're sharing with you, the resource that we're sharing with you in the 7 circles here.
So, today, the majority of our talk, we're going to emphasize foodways. But that's just one of what we've identified as these 7 areas of life that allowed our ancestors to thrive on this land for thousands of years. From all across Native country, our people thrived in good health, with active lifestyles, with good foodways, for the majority of our history. So it's really just this shorter period of time that we're in this reclamation process, right? And so, but we've identified these 7 areas that our people not only thrived in the past, but that we're getting back to now and that are going to be strong once again in the future with our communities. Which one do I press? Okay, so our foodways, of course, is the first thing, and we'll be getting a lot more into that in a moment, but sleep is, of course, a big part of living in balance, and we have many teachings for acknowledging the sacredness of the nighttime. We have many teachings for how to live in tune with the rhythms of the earth and how to have a healthy circadian rhythm, and all of the reasons that matters for our physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional health. So sleep is a part of living in balance. Movement, of course. We always say, look to our ceremonies. Every one of our Indigenous ceremonies from all of our nations usually involves some type of physical sacrifice, whether that's a fast or a run or even an isolation or a dance, right? So our people have always understood that movement is a part of life, not just for the way your body looks by any means, but for spiritual health, for community connectedness, and for, of course, physical health as well. So today, as ever, movement is a medicine that we all need. Sacred space, and in about a year, my book on Indigenous homes and wellness teachings is going to come out. The working title is Sacred Space, although we may change that because I actually recently found out there's like 3 other books called Sacred Space, but we've been using this term sacred space ever since we started teaching the 7 circles. I love it because it teaches that we have reverence for the home. The home is our relative. It's more than just an inanimate object. We have a relationship to home. And when that relationship is thriving, once again, our health in that home can thrive, and our health as families can thrive. And so from all across Native country, whether your people lived in hogans or teepees or longhouses or wigwams or plank houses, we can carry those teachings from those structures into our square houses and apartments today, and we can thrive once again under our roofs in our homes. The circle of ceremony. Thosh, I'll let you take that one. Mm-hmm.
And in ceremony, right, we have always had ceremony since time immemorial, ceremony for healing, ceremony for acknowledging celestial events, changes on the land, coming of age, death, birth, marriage, and such. So we always acknowledge that we continue to have that here, and this is a big part of our life ways as Native people that should continue. And then, of course, our community, our kinship, our social structures, belonging to that clan system, the belonging to community, family, and the greater community at large, and our role within that, in acknowledging healthy relationships. Healthy relationships is the foundation of family. It's the foundation of community. And so all of these circles right here is community and the land. When you think about our lifeways as Native people, it's in community, it's in kinship, and it's on the land, as you've seen in our sisters' talk just before this. That's what Indigenous lifeways in general, I've realized, is about. It's doing things for those we love on the land, with those that we love here. And so looking at the 7 circles right here, and if you'll see here at the center, you'll see that there's that spiritual, intellectual, physical, and emotional states. Those are the states that we all are made up of, and many of you are familiar with this in your own teachings from your people. We are made up of these states of beings, and that the lifeways and the 7 circles all contribute to our spiritual, physical, intellectual, and emotional well-being here. And so spirit is involved in everything that we do as Native people, right? So it doesn't need to be its own circle. It's involved in everything that we do. So we share this and also point out that the cyclical structure, the circular structure, that all these things are inextricably connected here. And that if we do one thing that's supposed to be regarded by dominant society for your mind and mental health, we also know that we're helping with emotion regulation. We're improving our overall system as a human being, our spirit consciousness as well. So we share this as well, and to show that all of these lifeways they're all interconnected. And this, as Native people, I feel that collectively this is part of our perspectives to offer in dominant society, is to break away from the compartmentalization of looking at everything from our physiology to our connection to the land and such, and understanding these things holistically and how these things are all interconnected. And the 7 circles demonstrates that. And we feel here the 7 circles, for us, the outcomes of it is things such as a vision for a lifespan, and thinking about how long do I want to live in this life, and what sort of quality of life do I want to live? What do I want to pass down that will reach the next 7 generations? Thinking about financial literacy so I can live comfortably in this world, and thinking about all of these things here that coincide with our ways as Native people, thinking about our cultural, not just preservation and restoration, but cultural evolution and being objective about evolving our culture. So today we're going to share with you, we're going to jump in and we're going to share some ideas about Foodways and this Foodways circles and how it's really interconnected to all those 7 circles. And we want you to think about how this pertains to you in your life journey. Some of the things that you see in the circles right there, those are things that your people have been doing as well. And it's a framework that is really rooted in how we as Native people have always operated. So it's a template. 7 circles is a template where you can zoom in and plug in your language, plug in your lifestyle, your people's ceremonies, and your people's practices. So here, we'll jump in and we'll share about foodways, that they were always the center of our culture, Native foodways, right? Until now, we see that capitalism is the center of much of our culture. And I think that our sister before this shared some great strategies on recentering foodways back in our cultures and our economies, but it starts with our individual journeys and what we are doing in our families and our schools and our communities. And as I said earlier, Indigenous Foodways is about doing things on the land with people you love, for people you love here.
Yeah, and just to show, this is a picture of our oidak, our field from
a couple seasons ago.
Yeah, that was a couple seasons ago at Thosh's dad's property there, where we're also building a house soon. And one of the things that we really look forward to about living on that land there right next to Thosh's dad is not just having extended family close by, but having that land there right outside our back door that we can really spend a lot more time growing food with our kids. And right now we go in and out. Some seasons it's really been a big part of their lives. Other seasons we've been distracted by too much travel or too much work and school, and we really look forward to that being a part of their daily lives there. But yeah, there's interruption. Colonial interruption of Indigenous foodways is a problem that persists. And of course, this is a systemic issue. It's nobody's fault as an individual if you haven't connected to your ancestral foodways, or if you haven't grown up with those teachings. But it's something that from across Native country we're attempting to reclaim.
So just looking at disconnection, we always have to acknowledge the disruption to our lifeways is a disconnection from the land is essentially what happened, right? And what happened is a loss of roles within our family and our clan system, within those foodways. And then, of course, the dependence on government food subsidy and how that become very traditionalized in our communities, and also the loss of indigenous words and languages too. Those of you that speak the language or you are learners of the language, when you engage with foodways, you understand that's a good place for us to start talking about our foodways, talking about the seeds, talking about when we are hungry, talking about when we eat. So looking at all these things, also what happened when the loss of land and foodways is this loss of grit and work ethic that our foodways had required, which really carried over to other aspects of our life when we learned these things here. And then also a loss of indigenous food and literacy and medicine, as well as what had happened to us as Native people. And then, of course, the health disparities is the outcome of that. So all of the metabolic disorders such as type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative, anxiety, addiction, depression, these are symptoms of a people out of balance, of a foodways out of balance, of a kinship in disarray. So we are in a healing phase as Native people, and looking at our foodways is a good place for us to start because it brings us everywhere on the land, brings us with the people, restores language. So we had to create new words for diseases like in Salt River or amongst the O'odham people. We didn't have type 2 diabetes, but we had to come up with words such as asuga mumkidug, sugar sickness. We didn't have this before. These are new things that we've had to bring in, unfortunately.
So people, when we kind of started out doing this wellness work some years ago, one of the questions we get all the time is, well, which diet do you follow, you know? We get accustomed to talking about foodways in terms of different diets that are trending and stuff like that. But we always say that those fad diets are something to sort of maybe approach with a critical mind, or to try to ignore altogether, because they ignore interconnected cultural, spiritual, ecological, and communal dimensions of indigenous food systems. So we're not, you know, a fan of those fad diets specifically. Just disclaimer, of course, we understand that for medical purposes, medical diets are important sometimes, but yeah.
And we always say that indigenous foodways is more than just nutrition, right? It's more than just protein, carbohydrates, fat, fiber. Those are important aspects of food that we should understand, but we should understand it's so much more when we think about it from our perspective. And for instance, right here on the screen, it's local food, right? It's whole food. It's food in its whole form, right? It's nutrient dense, it's medicinal. And I think also what goes into nutrient dense and medicinal is understanding the caloric intake of a lot of our foods. And if you look at historically, many times the people, their food, the foods that we were taking in was lower in calorie but high in nutrients, versus today a lot of the food out there that we take in the standard American diet, it's high in calorie, low in nutrients, right? We're not getting enough bang for our buck, such as with native foods here. So that's what that is. And also our foods was sustainable as well. Labor intensive meaning we're getting out, we're traversing the land, right? We're doing this manual labor, we're doing this work, we're expending energy as well. And in that process, we're learning so much about our foodways.
Yeah, and just to interject, and not even just out on the land and, you know, hunting and growing and all that, but even labor intensive in the home. You know, it takes a little bit more work to get up and, you know, cook a meal than it would to order in. But there's value, an intrinsic value that returns to us when we do expend that labor.
And once again, bringing in our language, it involves our language, right? As well, identifying our foods. These foods are spiritually significant. We have giving of thanks ceremonies that we recite. We do ceremonies to welcome these plants as they come on the land, or looking at the animal nations when it's time to go out and hunt and to fish. And of course, these foods are seasonal, so it connects us to the land. That's one of our other circles right there, is connection to land as well. And excuse me here, this clicker's not. It's a little bit delayed. So really quickly right here, indigenous foodways, persistence and evolution. And of course, we always have to acknowledge breastfeeding and baby's first food and the connection that happens there. And all of us who are not breastfeeding can support that space, but also knowing the grocery store and when to, how to navigate it, getting comfortable with cooking once again, being able to be empowered by knowing all the ingredients that's in our food as well, and then giving thanks for our food, even if it's just in your mind, in your consciousness, and even if it's for a processed food, because those changes happen in our mind here that changes our outlook into a more positive viewpoint on things. And then getting into some of the original ways of acquiring food here is foraging growing food, and continuing to hunt and fish. And supporting all of these areas, and instead of looking at a diet, we're looking at how did my people acquire food historically? How do I acquire food today too? Whether I'm in a rural area, at a reservation, or living in a city center. These areas we can kind of follow right here. And once again, these areas are less about fad diets and more about how am I getting the food, and where am I getting my protein, where am I getting my fat, where am I getting my carbohydrates, and how much am I consuming here.
And what I always like to say with that is you may not be able to do all 7 of those things, but you can support them, and also you can do at least one of them. For example, giving thanks for our food and getting in the habit of that and eating mindfully. That's something that all of us can begin to do, and we can begin to do it right now. We don't need any resources.
So we're going to show you some pictures that make you hungry again. How about some javelina heart cooked on a lava rock with some mesquite coals? And look at right there, sitord is cactus syrup, the syrup from the saguaro cactus fruit, the Hashan baidach that's harvested in July time right there. Oops, it went back. Right here, let's go to that one right there. How about some meatballs of wojapi, toasted squash seeds right there. And these are just, we don't eat like this every day, but when I do have food from the past, I wish I could. When I have food from all those areas, I always do that. What could I cook with something that's grown, something that's foraged, and something that's hunted? Because I think hunting is often less looked at in food sovereignty. And so I like to bring that into these spaces and encourage people to think about these things as well. Right here we have some manomen and dried cherries. I know all of our Ojibwe relatives right there. And hoon salad. Hoon is the 60-day corn from Pima, and some venison slabs from one of my hunts here. But indigenous food preparation, harvesting, and processing are equally important as nutritional value. And as I said earlier, there's always a focus on nutritional value. We should understand that, but we should also understand the work that's involved in that. There's also a lot to benefit from that as well. They demand greater energy, and if you're looking at over time, this may improve metabolic health because the amount of energy that we're expending, especially if we're controlling caloric intake and we're doing these things, we're in a fasted state, just like how the people did for a long time. And also what happens is a connection to land and seasons, and also it fosters a reverence for our food as well. And so, and thinking about these teachings that as we are engaging in the process on the land right there, and I'm just skipping ahead right here because we have just a few minutes left. And I'll share this with you right here. Here's another one with hanam is the choya buckhorn choya cactus that grows out in the desert. In the springtime, it produces a fruit. We harvest it, and it's a process. And it has this gelatinous substance in it, and it actually slows down the absorption rate of glucose as well. So I threw some chickpeas, which we call karavash, and then some kidney beans that were store-bought. Bought the hanam I harvested, and the kidney beans store-bought, and the karavash is from Ramon Farms, indigenous food producer, and some venison that I had harvested on one of my hunts right here. And you can see that I'm not a type 2 diabetic. I'm not living with diabetes, but I like to show how indigenous food, how it has a very minimal impact on our glycemic load when we're eating, even in someone who's not living with type 2 diabetes, for prevention. So I use a continuous glucose monitor, and you see that the pre-meal glucose is 90, and you'll see that little graph it should play here. It'll go from 90, and you'll see the blood sugar should go. It's not playing. There we go. It should play. You see it going? It only went up, so it barely went up anything from this meal right here. You'll see that the pre-meal glucose was 90, and 2 hours after postprandial, 90 milligrams per deciliter, and the peak glucose was only 106 milligrams per deciliter. It deviated only 16 milligrams per deciliter. And from what I've always learned is that lower variability over time is always better. Lower glucose variability over time is always better. So I share this, and because sometimes I'll eat another meal and my deviation is 50, 60 milligrams and blood sugar is up to 200, and sure, it comes down because I am not someone living with type 2 diabetes, but I share this to show just how important native foods are for our glucose metabolism. And I think that this kind of information is information we should share with our people regularly. Our people should have a better understanding of the foods and what they are doing to their glucose metabolism as well. So I wanted to just share those real quick, and we're going to get through some of these, and Chelsey and I will take some questions after. But we're talking about preserve, revitalize, and evolve native foods. I think that what's important is you're getting various people at the table in your communities, those with oral tradition and knowledge of the practices, along with those who understand the science, maybe science bringing in some things that also is in conjunction with what we know, but maybe it's bringing in things we didn't know. Or also, nutritional literacy should be a big part of that, and bringing your dietitians to the table with your knowledge keepers and people that work in environment. And then, of course, our spiritual intuition. And I think this is really important because oftentimes I hear people say, well, this thing has been lost. Well, we lost that. And I think that when we open up our mind, when we're living a good life and we're sober from things that don't hurt our mind, our body, our spirit, and our intellectual well-being, we open up the consciousness and those things come back in. Yeah. We're out on the land and you're working with the seeds, you're working with the plants. And those of you that involve in that, or you're out there in the land or with people, these things come into consciousness and you know this and you follow it and it becomes, you restore it. And you're evolving, you're revitalizing.
And just to give you an example of how we've utilized that spiritual intuition in our home, when we had our first newborn baby, Aloe, I said to Thosh, when we do a first food ceremony for her, I think it should be a plant food from Autumn culture, So we decided to feed her the Autumn squash, the Autumn hod, for her first food. And we made a big family gathering out of it, and we held a feast. And I said, this didn't happen for me, but I think our people probably have always made quite a celebration out of the baby's first food. And we're in a very intertribal family, so we also have to find out ways to incorporate both sides of our cultures. So we did that with Aloe, and then when Weston came, our second baby, this is a picture of it, I said we should do an animal food for Weston. And so her first food was
venison bone broth.
Venison bone broth from one of Thosh's hunts that he had gone on that year. So, and then of course we feasted, and all these other indigenous foods were on the table as well from both of our respective regions, and our families came and gathered and witnessed that, and we celebrated the babies. So that's just one way that we've used our intuition to kind of reclaim or create a new tradition in our home, an intertribal tradition that honors both of our lineages and that brings up our children in a good way in connection with their original foods. So we always talk about indigenous eating habits, norms, and etiquette that are, come from our past, come from our history, but that we can maintain in the present. No matter whether you're eating, quote unquote, ancestral foods or not, we have these ways of going about food, ways of interacting with food. And one thing we've learned is that in most communities, elders and young children were always encouraged to eat whenever and whatever they wanted, and to eat first, and to just have access. Now, of course, this is during a time when it would have been a nice, healthy pot of stew in the middle of the home, and there was no risk of too much sugar or too much processed ingredients. So we have to proceed with that teaching in a slightly different way today with a little bit more caution. But I do think that the loving energy of that, trying to have an abundance of food on hand that isn't going to harm their health, where the kids and elders can once again be fed that nourishment in the way that they always once were. So also a commitment to sharing and feeding others. This is something we've never lost in Indian country. We're really good about feeding each other and having food at our gatherings. Sometimes online you see a lot of debate between meat eaters and plant eaters, and I just think back in the day it was a lot more practical than that. Whatever was available was honored and was appreciated, and there was no kind of hierarchy or battle between plant and animal foods. And then, of course, again, food always being offered to visitors in the home, that being a part of our etiquette, part of our daily life. And for us, we try to feed our parents and our kids and our relatives with foods that will nourish them and help them live in a healthy way. Intermittent fasting has always been a part of regular life in tribal communities, and there's different teachings on that. And then, of course, portion control and rationing food stores out of courtesy for others.
And so we just, we threw a lot at you right there. And we, again, our 7 circles, there's so much more to discuss with 7 circles. There's so much more to share. And we do a lot of trainings around the entire 7 circles. But we wanted to thank you for allowing us to come up here and share about how the Foodways is really central in a lot of things, and for our general identity as Native people and preserving our way of life, so that way it spans multi-generations, and we have many different generations living together at once. That a good area for us to start is focusing and bringing back the Foodways back in our schools, right? This is something that it should be grassroots in the communities, as well as all of the tribal councils being involved with putting all the energy and effort, and the policy in the community. The policy of communities should never supersede the cultural values and the life ways of the people. They should be integrated as one and the same here. So hopefully what we shared is something that is reaffirming for what you're already doing, and maybe there's something new there that you can bring into your personal life, your family, and your community, because that's what we all are a part of right here. So we always just like to share that, and we always like this quote right here. The quote right here: with every deliberation, we must consider the impact it'll have on the seventh generation right here. And we, just like our sister had spoken about it, like right here when Chelsey was carrying aloe or Weston in here, these are things that around their traditional foods, and these are things that we didn't have. So we're doing that for that next generation. So every generation we're giving so much more. Let's go to that next one. And our book.
And as Thosh mentioned, we published this book in 2022 with HarperCollins. It's available at any mainstream bookstore, Barnes & Noble and all that, but we always like to support Indigenous booksellers. So Birch Bark Books is one that is in town. They're a wonderful store, and so you can get our book there if you'd like. Mm-hmm.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. What's that?
Questions? Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a question for them. Can I be your baby so I can eat good? Everyone's like, me too.
You could just come over, you're gonna do all that.
Just come over and eat with you guys. We'll bring the mesquite honey. Okay, let's get your questions. What are some attainable ways to implement more of an ancestral diet for those who are limited in access to those foods?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one thing that we always share with people is that implementing our values as Native people in the foods that we eat, I think, is a good place to start, because we do recognize that a lot of our people are in large city centers. They're in areas that they're away from their homelands. Some of the foodways are not attainable for them. So we always say, we can start with right here in our mind, our intellect, our spirit, and do things such as what we always share is that one thing you can do is put away the devices when you're eating. So that way your attention isn't right there in the device and the content, but your attention and your focus is on the food. You're paying in your mind, you're giving thanks for that plant or animal that given its life. You're thinking about the farm workers that prepared that and how did it get there. You're acknowledging the flavors, you're acknowledging the textures of it, and you're being mindful. And when we are right here scrolling and not paying attention, our attention is here, not here, and that's when we tend to overeat. And the food experience is gone, and I'm like, oh, it's all gone. I wasn't even paying attention, and I didn't enjoy it. So I think first is to put away a device and give thanks for that as well, and also thinking about other things such as looking at the micronutrients of your people, and where could I get that in the store? The micro and macronutrients. How can I replicate that by going in the store, sticking to more fibrous foods here, and and meats, or depending on how your people have eaten.
Yeah, for sure. Like, for example, there's times on our website we've put up a recipe that utilizes bison or venison, but we'll say, well, if you don't have access to that, maybe you got ground beef in your commodity box, replace and just use, what you have, and recognize that ground beef has a similar macronutrient profile to what the ground bison would have had. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and ask Grandma what she ate.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Always,
and find out what she ate and the ingredients. And that's why I made this campaign. It's a global campaign. Let's eat Indigenous. And so if you guys have seen this, and you have some stickers, I think, in the prizes, it's all about that, eating together. So next question, how do you counter negative framing in nutrition and myths about Indigenous foods such as corn being a bad carb or beans depleting minerals via lectins, etc.?
Yeah, that's really prominent, and you hear that especially in mainstream dietetics. They speak against corn and such, but when us Native people hear that, we look at our corn and we know that our corn I think it's education. I think that that's where the indigenous nutritional literacy comes into play here. If you look at, like, for instance, where I come from, the O'atamhun, it has a very low glycemic load on it, and I've done a lot of blood sugar experiments where I'll eat, a bowl of corn soup, and it's got some venison, and once again, the blood sugar barely goes up. But even, I know I'm not a person who is living with type 2 diabetes, but if I do have a standard corn, the sweet corn is higher in fructose, it will shoot up. It will shoot up, so there is a difference, and I think that it's important that we have to continue to spotlight the varieties and the diversities of our food. And I think that's really important for our own people, first and foremost, to understand. And if that means that the various communities need to do studies and look at this and look at the nutritional content of the difference between, the flour corns and all the different types of a variety of corn, I think it's just so important. The glass corn and such.
Yep, the Hopi sweet corn.
Yeah.
And learn how that they actually ate it, because taking our time to eat something, chewing 20, 30 times is really important, and having that conversation during those meals is important so that we're eating also less and not over consuming.
And I think also one thing real quick too, another thing to think about too, that some of the foods that were calorically dense or did cause a glucose spike historically, and that was because also I think that was beneficial for the people, because they couldn't eat leisurely throughout the day. So there was a long fasting periods, not because it was a trend, but because they had to ration food. So people were just more insulin sensitive. So getting a blood sugar spike wasn't a bad thing, or people were expending energy. Now that's what I was saying in the presentation. We're not doing the work anymore involved to produce the food, and we have to get that component back to it. Even if that means, okay, I'm gonna do 10-minute walks around my block post-meal, to sort of make up for my sedentary life in acquiring this food.
Yeah, we just need to learn how to chase some javelinas or let them chase us, right? And eat their hearts. Yeah. Okay, one more question. Let's see. Can you speak to efforts being made to ensure there are adequate and accessible food composition data for indigenous foods?
I'm not familiar with what's happening in that regard. I would like to see that for sure. I think that's a great question. We do need data. I'm sure some of you are doing that out there. Yeah, I see these people. Talk to them over there. They have the answer to that. And I would love to see more data like that being put out there. But once again, I believe it's our communities. We need to get our communities on board. Our councils need to be, I think, the ones that are saying, what can we do to improve the data and the literacy on these foods, on our own foods, in addition to restoring them. So we're getting it from those multi-fronts there. So I don't have an answer for that. I wish I did, and I would love to see that. You?
Yeah, and that's why we're having this conference, right? To be able to share those resources. And next week we will host, in my area, an Indigenous Evaluators Network Evaluators Symposium, so Data Symposium, Indigenous Data Symposium. So that's next week in Albuquerque at the Route 66 Casino. So we're seeing more events, talk about these, but also we need you guys cooking at these events too. And sharing that, because it's important to be able to expose everyone to have the participation when we're talking about taste education, and especially native gastronomy. So it's important to be able to do that. All right, you guys want to share any last words, or?
That's it. We thank you all for your...
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for having us here today and for allowing us to share and dialogue about this. And we look forward to continuing to learn from you all as the conference goes on.
And we'll remember your faces in our prayers, and we hope that as you go back home, you arrive home back safely, and you come back home rejuvenated, and that you're able to share with your people and your community all the things that you learned here. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job. Thank you. So inspiring to see them.